May 16, 1943. 21:28 hours. RAF Scampton, Lincolnshire. The engines begin first. 4 Rolls-Royce Merlin power plants cough, then roar to life in the dark, their exhaust flames flickering blue against the blackout. Ground crew step back, faces lit by oil-streaked light. The concrete trembles beneath 60,000 pounds of Avro Lancaster. You can feel it in your chest before you understand it. No speeches, no ceremony, just a signal lamp cutting once through the night. Inside the cockpit of Lancaster ED-932, calls Sign G for George. Wing Commander Guy Gibson adjusts his flying helmet and checks his instruments again. Artificial horizon steady. Boost pressure rising. Navigator hunched over charts. Flight engineer watching the RPMs climb. The bomb aimer lies flat in the nose blister, staring into darkness that feels endless. Beneath the fuselage hangs something no enemy has ever seen. A cylindrical weapon, 9,000 pounds of engineered audacity. It looks unfinished, exposed, impossible. Operation Chastise. But no one says the name now. The throttle pushes forward. The Lancaster begins its takeoff roll, tail lifting as speed builds. The perimeter track flashes past in streaks of shadow. At 110 miles per hour, Gibson eases back. The aircraft shudders free of Earth and climbs into black sky. 19 Lancasters follow, lifting one by one into the English night. 3 waves, different routes. One objective. Ahead lies the North Sea, then occupied Europe, then the Ruhr Valley. The dams, low level. That was the order. 50 feet above ground, sometimes lower. Radar would not see them hugging the terrain. Searchlights would struggle. Flak gunners would have seconds to react. But at that height, every telegraph pole, every church spire, every rising ridge becomes a threat. They cross the coast at Mablethorpe and descend immediately. The altimeter unwinds. 50 feet. 40. The sea below is black glass, broken only by white wake as the Lancasters skim. So low their prop wash kisses the surface. In the rear turret, a young gunner grips his Brownings and scans for night fighters. Somewhere in the dark, Luftwaffe airfields wait. Messerschmitt Bf 110s can be airborne within minutes. Over the Dutch coast, the first searchlights snap on. Thin white spears cutting upward. Tracer fire arcs red across the horizon. One Lancaster veers sharply, almost touching treetops. Another disappears briefly behind a church tower before climbing just enough to clear it. You're flying by instinct now. Map, reading by moonlight. Rivers become highways. Railway lines become guides. A missed landmark could mean disaster. One aircraft clips high-tension wires. A flash. A wing dips. It vanishes in a bloom of orange against farmland below. No time to circle. No time to mourn. They press on. Inside Gibson's cockpit, the atmosphere is controlled tension. He checks his watch. Timing is everything. The weapon slung beneath them is not dropped like ordinary ordnance. It must be released at exactly 60 feet altitude, at precisely 232 miles per hour, spinning backward at 500 revolutions per minute. Too fast and it overshoots. Too slow and it sinks short. Barnes Wallis believed it could be done. Many others did not. The Ruhr appears ahead, darker than the sky itself. Industrial heartland of Germany. Steelworks, coal mines, factories feeding the Wehrmacht, all powered by water harness behind towering concrete walls. The Mohn Dam rises out of shadow like a fortress, 130 feet high, nearly half a mile long, flanked by anti-aircraft towers. Torpedo nets strung across the reservoir to stop conventional attack. This is why the bomb spins. Gibson descends lower still. Floodlights sweep the water. Flak erupts in the towers. Shell bursts, rocking the Lancaster violently. The bomb aimer peers through his sight, calling out height using twin spotlights converging on the surface. When the beams touch, they are at 60 feet. Steady, steady. The dam wall grows in the windscreen, immense, immovable. The engineer engages a motor that spins the upkeep mine beneath them. The aircraft vibrates with mechanical force. The weapon hums with stored physics. Speed correct. Tracer streaks past the canopy. A shell explodes off the port wing. Stand by. The release button waits under Gibson's thumb. Bomb gone. The Lancaster leaps upward as 9,000 pounds drop free. Below, the cylinder strikes the water and skips. Once, twice, 3 times. Each bounce deliberate, defying gravity like a stone thrown across a pond. It clears the torpedo nets, strikes the dam face, sinks. A second of silence. Then the reservoir erupts in a white column of water taller than the aircraft itself. The shock wave slams into the Lancaster as Gibson banks away. Concrete still stands. The dam has not fallen. And now every gun in the valley knows exactly where they are. The shock wave rolls across the reservoir like thunder trapped in stone. Gibson does not look back for long. He cannot afford it. The Lancaster claws upward through flak bursts, black puffs snapping open at wingtip distance. The rear gunner calls out bearings, voice tight, but steady. The Moan Dam still stands, scarred but defiant, floodlights sweeping frantically for the next attacker. Behind Gibson, another Lancaster drops low into the valley. Flight Lieutenant Hopgood lines up for his run, engines straining at exact speed. The anti-aircraft gunners have corrected their aim now. Shells detonate directly in his path. Tracer fire climbs toward him in violent red ladders. You can almost feel the aircraft shaking as it holds 60 feet. Steady, steady. A burst catches a fuselage. Flames lick from the starboard wing. The bomb aimer stays on the site. There is no abort call. Not here. Not after crossing half of Europe at rooftop height. Bomb gone. The upkeep skips cleanly, racing toward the concrete wall. Hopgood's Lancaster struggles to gain altitude, burning badly. For a moment it seems to climb. Then it rolls gently, almost gracefully, and disappears behind the dam in a bloom of orange fire. On the water, another explosion detonates against the face. Spray towers skyward. The dam trembles. Still holds. Gibson circles back, deliberately drawing fire to himself. His Lancaster becomes a decoy, flying parallel to the wall to keep the guns occupied while the next aircraft approaches. It is a calculated risk. Every second he remains inside the flak envelope increases the odds that G for George will not make it home. Flight Lieutenant Martin comes in low. Perfect speed. Perfect height. The spinning mine skips with brutal precision and slams against the masonry before sinking into darkness. The detonation follows almost instantly. This time the explosion sounds different, deeper, angrier, a concussion that rattles teeth and bone. The dam silhouette shifts in the moonlight. For a heartbeat, nothing happens. Then a dark wound appears midway along the wall. Water begins to pour through in a narrow ribbon. It widens. Concrete fractures outward under unimaginable pressure. Suddenly, the entire center section collapses. The reservoir does not spill. It lunges. A wall of water bursts through the breach, roaring down the valley with unstoppable force. Trees vanish. Buildings dissolve. The flood becomes a moving landscape of destruction, racing toward the Ruhr's factories and power stations. In the cockpit, even seasoned aircrews stare in disbelief. Months of secrecy, weeks of training over English reservoirs, countless low-level practice runs. All of it culminates in this single impossible sight. But there is no time to celebrate. The radio crackles. The Eder Dam remains untouched. Gibson reforms the surviving aircraft and turns southeast. The terrain toward Eder Sea is treacherous, a maze of hills and narrow valleys. Unlike Moan, the Eder is not heavily defended, but its geography makes a straight approach nearly impossible. The Lancasters must weave through ridgelines before dropping into the attack run. Fuel gauges creep lower. One aircraft reports damage severe enough to abort. Another is missing entirely, lost somewhere between coast and target. The valley of the Eder emerges under silver moonlight, deceptively peaceful. The dam curves like a massive stone bow across the river, no flak towers bristling from its crest. But the surrounding hills create violent air currents. Each approach forces a pilot to thread between slopes before pulling up sharply to align with the wall. The first attempt fails. The angle is wrong. The aircraft climbs away to circle again, engines laboring. Second attempt. Too high. Third attempt. Turbulence slams the Lancaster sideways, nearly clipping a hillside. Inside the nose blister, the bomb aimer breathes in slow counts, trying to steady his sight picture. The spotlights converge on the water's surface. 60 feet. Airspeed steady at 232 miles per hour. The spinning mine hums beneath the fuselage. Hold it, release. The cylinder strikes the reservoir and skips toward the wall, illuminated in flashes of moonlight. It impacts perfectly and sinks. The explosion detonates against the dam's base, sending a geyser skyward that briefly obscures everything. The aircraft roars past the crest, barely clearing the stone parapet. For several long seconds the dam remains intact. Then cracks spread across its curved face like lightning frozen in stone. And then it gives way. The breach tears open, unleashing millions of tons of water into the sleeping valley below. Villages vanish under sudden darkness. Roads are erased. Rail lines twist like wire. 2 major dams destroyed in a single night. Yet the cost is mounting. Out of 19 aircraft that left Scampton, several are already gone. Crews lost over the Netherlands. 1 burned at Moan. Others damaged, fuel dwindling, engines overstressed from prolonged low-level flight. Gibson sets course for home. The route back will be no less dangerous. German night fighters are surely airborne now. Searchlights sweep wider arcs. Flak batteries wait along known river crossings. Behind them, the Ruhr begins to flood. Power stations falter. Industrial districts lose electricity. Chaos spreads through the heart of the Reich. But over hostile territory, victory feels fragile, because the night is far from over. The valley behind them roars with unleashed water, but ahead there's only darkness. Gibson levels the Lancaster at treetop height once more. The altimeter needle trembles just above 50 feet. Fuel gauges show less comfort now. Engines that have been strained for hours hum with a harsher edge. The adrenaline that carried them through the attack begins to thin, replaced by calculation. Navigation lights remain off. Silence on the intercom unless essential. Every crewman knows the routine drilled into them over weeks of rehearsal. Yet nothing in training matches the weight of what they have just witnessed. 2 dams broken. Entire valleys drowning. Over Germany, the searchlights are awake. The first beam snaps across the night sky near Ham. Then another. They crisscross like a lattice, probing for silhouettes against the stars. Anti-aircraft batteries send exploratory bursts upward, hoping to find a shape inside the glare. Flak port side. The Lancaster banks slightly, skimming over rooftops so low that chimney stacks flash past eye level. The bomb bay doors are empty now, but the aircraft still carries a heavy cylindrical mounting gear. It drags against the air, reducing speed. They cannot outrun night fighters if caught. Somewhere above, Messerschmitt Bf-110s and Junkers Ju-88s begin their hunt. Their radar sets search for reflections. Their crews are experienced in the dark. You can almost sense the sky tightening. One of the returning Lancasters reports engine trouble. Over the Zuiderzee, it loses altitude rapidly. A German flak burst finds it moments later. The aircraft disintegrates in midair, falling in fragments that scatter across Blackwater. No parachutes visible. Another aircraft clips a power line while hugging the ground near the Dutch coast. Sparks cascade along its wing before it cartwheels into farmland. The mission that demanded precision on approach now demands the same precision simply to survive. Gibson keeps his voice steady over the radio. Short confirmations. No wasted words. His responsibility has shifted from attack leader to shepherd. Every surviving crew is counting on clear headings and disciplined timing. They cross into occupied Holland again, following canals that glint faintly under moonlight. The navigator calls out landmarks: railway junction, bridge, church spire. At this altitude, errors are fatal. A sudden glow appears on the horizon. Searchlights cluster ahead. German night fighters have formed a barrier. Climb, the engineer asks. No. Climbing makes them visible against the sky. Staying low is dangerous, but less predictable. Gibson chooses unpredictability. The Lancaster drops even lower, prop wash stirring treetops. The rear gunner tracks a shadow overhead. For a moment, a twin-engine silhouette sweeps across the moon. Tracer fire rips downward. The Lancaster jolts as rounds punch through the fuselage. One engine sputters, then stabilizes. The mid-upper gunner fires a burst in return. The night fighter breaks off, overshooting in the dark. No one cheers. The channel lies ahead, but reaching it requires crossing one final belt of flak guarding the coastline. German batteries, no aircraft will attempt to escape here. They are ready. The first bursts explode dangerously close. Shrapnel rattles against aluminum skin like thrown gravel. The bomb aimer smells cordite, seeping into the nose compartment. Hold her steady. Speed increases slightly as they head west. The coastline finally breaks beneath them. Black water replaces land. The North Sea stretches ahead, cold and absolute. Only then does the crew allow themselves to breathe. Behind them, Germany burns in scattered fires and flooding valleys. Ahead, England waits unseen beyond the horizon. Fuel is critical now. Prolonged low-level flight has consumed more than expected. Gibson calculates silently. Enough to reach Scampton, if no diversions are required. One by one, scattered voices report crossing the coast. Some are missing entirely. No reply to repeated calls. Empty silence where call signs should be. Dawn begins to creep along the eastern edge of the sky, a thin gray line separating sea from air. Flying into daylight increases risk of interception, but the worst appears behind them. At 5:30 hours, the English coastline appears as a faint smudge. The sight hits harder than the explosions did. After hours of darkness and hostile ground, this quiet strip of land feels unreal. They climb gradually now, gaining altitude for landing approach. The familiar outline of RAF Scampton emerges, perimeter track pale in early morning light. Ground crews wait, counting aircraft shapes against the sky. G for George touches down first. Wheels screech briefly against runway. Engines throttle back. The Lancaster rolls to a stop amid exhaust haze. Silence settles inside the cockpit. No one moves immediately. They have done the impossible. But as other aircraft land, the gaps become clear. 19 departed. 11 return. 53 aircrew will not step off their aircraft today. Gibson climbs down the ladder into cold morning air. His uniform smells of oil and cordite. Around him, mechanics and officers move quickly. Faces tense. Confirmation reports begin filtering in from reconnaissance and resistance networks. The Moan Dam breached. The Eder destroyed. The Sorp attack but intact. Initial estimates suggest catastrophic flooding across Aurora. Power grids disrupted. Factories submerged. Rail lines destroyed. Strategically significant. Tactically astonishing. Human cost immeasurable. As the sun rises over Lincolnshire, the reality of the night begins to settle. The world will soon know what happened. Newspapers will celebrate daring. Command will evaluate results. Berlin will assess damage. But in this moment, standing on dew-soaked concrete beside a silent Lancaster, the victory feels complicated, because the weapon that defied physics has changed more than the shape of two dams. It has rewritten the boundaries of possibility, and the consequences are only beginning. May 17, 1943, 10:15 hours. Air Ministry, London. Telephones ring without pause. Situation maps are unrolled across long tables. Red grease pencil circles the Ruhr Valley. Intelligence officers lean over reconnaissance prints, still damp from development trays. The breaches are visible even in grainy black and white. At the Moan, the wound is unmistakable. A jagged gap carved through 130 feet of reinforced concrete. Downstream, entire sections of valley are submerged beneath muddy torrents. Railway bridges twisted. Power stations drowned. At the Eder, the curved wall has collapsed inward, spilling its reservoir into farmland and villages below. Barnes Wallace studies the photographs in silence. The engineer's thin frame seems smaller inside the crowded room. Months earlier, he had stood before skeptical officials describing hydrodynamic backspin and rotational stabilization. Many believed the mathematics. Few believed the reality. Now the evidence sits on the table. The upkeep mine has worked, yet celebration is restrained. Casualty lists arrive from RAF Scampton. 8 aircraft lost. 53 airmen missing or confirmed dead. Entire crews erased in seconds over Holland or against the dam towers. The cost of innovation is written in names. Across Britain, news bulletins begin cautiously. The BBC speaks of a daring night attack on German dams. Specifics are withheld, but the tone carries pride. In factories and homes, listeners lean closer to wireless sets. After years of defensive struggle, here is something bold. You can feel the shift. In Germany, the reaction is immediate and furious. Emergency crews scramble through flood zones. Civilians wade through wreckage searching for survivors. Propaganda ministries attempt to contain the narrative, blaming saboteurs or exaggeration. But the water cannot be hidden. It has reshaped entire valleys. Industrial production falters. The Ruhr's hydroelectric output drops sharply. Steelworks lose power. Coal mines flood. For weeks, tens of thousands of forced laborers are diverted to repair efforts instead of manufacturing weapons. Strategically, the blow is real, but it is not decisive. German engineers work with relentless efficiency. Temporary dams rise. Pumping stations operate around the clock. Within months, much of the infrastructure is restored. Albert Speer, Minister of Armaments, reallocates resources to ensure output continues. The Reich absorbs punishment and keeps fighting. Back at Scampton, the returning crews face a different reckoning. Debriefings stretch for hours. Exact release speeds are recorded. Heights confirmed. Flak concentrations mapped. Every detail is dissected to refine future operations. Guy Gibson sits before intelligence officers recounting each run. His tone remains measured, almost detached, but exhaustion lines his face. He knows the success carries weight. It will follow him everywhere now. Within days, he will be awarded the Victoria Cross. Public recognition arrives swiftly. Newspapers print his photograph. Crowds cheer the story of the bouncing bomb that skipped across water like a child's stone. What the headlines cannot capture is the discipline behind it. Weeks of training at low altitude over Derwent Reservoir. Crews flying at 60 feet by moonlight until instinct replaced fear. Special altimeter spotlights installed beneath fuselages. Mechanical motors added to spin the mine at precisely 500 revolutions per minute. Precision layered upon precision. Barnes Wallace visits Scampton quietly. He meets surviving aircrew. He speaks little. Some say he carries visible guilt for the losses. Others say he believes firmly that war demands such risks. Both can be true. The scientific principle behind upkeep seems simple when described on paper. Backspin creates lift and forward momentum across water surface tension. The rotation pulls the weapon tight against the dam wall before detonation. But executing theory in combat required perfect coordination between engineer and aviator. For 617 Squadron, the raid becomes identity. They are no longer an experimental unit. They are specialists in precision attack. The air staff begins assigning them new targets that demand extraordinary accuracy. Viaducts, U-boat pens, hardened bunkers. Innovation has proven its worth, but the war grinds on. In the Ruhr, floodwaters recede slowly, leaving mud and ruin. Civilians bury their dead. Allied planners analyze whether the damage justified the sacrifice. Military historians will debate it for decades. Did the raid significantly shorten the war? Did it divert enough German resources to matter? What cannot be debated is the audacity. 19 bombers flew at rooftop height into the most heavily defended industrial region in Europe, carrying a weapon many considered impossible. 11 returned. 2 dams collapsed. The psychological shock reverberated far beyond physical destruction. It demonstrated that British engineering could outthink German defenses, that carefully calculated science could pierce seemingly invulnerable fortifications. And it sent a message. No target was untouchable. Yet even as Britain celebrates, planners are already looking ahead. The war demands continuous escalation. New technologies, greater risks, more precision. The bouncing bomb is not the end of innovation. It is a beginning, because in modern warfare, imagination can be as destructive as artillery. And the men who flew that night have proven that physics itself can be bent toward survival. But bending the laws of nature comes with consequence. And the next mission will demand even more. Summer 1943. RAF Scampton no longer feels like a quiet Lincolnshire station. It feels like a laboratory for war. 617 Squadron has been remade. The men still with the same blue uniforms, still brief in the same low brick buildings, still eat under blackout curtains. But something intangible has shifted. The raid on the dams has turned them into a precision instrument, and precision demands constant sharpening. New aircraft arrive. Modified Avro Lancasters with strengthened bomb bays and upgraded sights. Ground crews work through the night adjusting mounting for weapons not yet publicly acknowledged. Barnes-Wallace returns with another idea. If a spinning mine can breach a dam, what could a massive earth-penetrating bomb do to reinforced concrete? German U-boat pens along the French coast are nearly immune to standard ordnance. Their roofs are meters thick, layered with reinforced steel and concrete. Conventional bombing scratches them. Wallace proposes something different. A tall, streamlined weapon designed to fall from extreme altitude, accelerating under gravity to supersonic speed before impact. It would burrow deep before detonation, creating a seismic shock capable of shattering foundations. The tall boy, to deliver it accurately, crews must master high-altitude bombing with unprecedented precision, no longer 50 feet above water. Now 20,000 feet above flak-filled skies. The margin of error shrinks in a different way. Wind drift, air density, timing. Everything must align. Training intensifies. You watch them practice over English countryside, using church spires and factory roofs as aiming references. Bomb aimers calculate wind vectors with slide rules. Navigators refine timing to the second. Pilots learn to hold steady flight under sustained anti-aircraft fire. Guy Gibson has moved on to other duties, but his legacy shapes the unit. Command passes to leaders equally demanding. Standards are unforgiving. A miss is not merely disappointment. It is failure. By late 1943, 617 Squadron strikes the Dortmund EMS Canal. The tall boy tears open the waterway, flooding key transport routes. The shock waves from underground detonations prove as devastating as Wallace predicted. German repair crews scramble yet again. The pattern becomes clear. Identify a target considered indestructible. Study it obsessively. Engineer a weapon specifically for its destruction. Train until error is unacceptable. Strike with surgical force. In June 1944, after Allied forces land in Normandy, the squadron receives a new assignment. V weapon sites in northern France. Concrete bunkers launching V-1 flying bombs toward London. These sites are hardened, camouflaged, and heavily defended. The Lancasters approach in daylight this time. Anti-aircraft fire blooms in thick black clouds around them. The bomb aimer peers through the stabilizing sight, waiting for precise moment to release. Tall boys drop, disappearing through reinforced roofs before detonating beneath. Entire bunkers collapse inward. Precision is no longer experimental. It is doctrine, yet the war evolves again. By late 1944, reconnaissance photographs reveal a different prize anchored in a Norwegian fjord. The German battleship Tirpitz, sister ship to Bismarck, a floating fortress whose mere presence threatens Allied Arctic convoys. Previous attacks have damaged but not destroyed her. Torpedo bombers failed. Midget submarines crippled but did not sink her. 617 Squadron is assigned the task. They will fly from northern Scotland to Norway, carrying tall boys across mountain ranges and icy seas. The range pushes aircraft limits. Weather is unpredictable. German defenses are layered. On November 12, 1944, Lancasters cross the Norwegian coast under pale winter light. Tirpitz lies moored in Tromsø Fjord, smoke drifting from her funnels. Anti-aircraft batteries open immediately. The sky becomes a cage of exploding shells. At altitude, the bomb aimers align on the immense gray hull. Release. Tall boys fall in long arcs, accelerating toward steel decks. One strikes near the forward turret, penetrating before detonation. Another lands close to the keel. The explosion lifts the battleship violently. Moments later, Tirpitz capsizes. A symbol of German naval power rolls onto her side and sinks into cold water. For 617 Squadron, the mission confirms their evolution. From skipping bombs across reservoirs to dropping seismic weapons on battleships, they have become the embodiment of calculated force. But even specialists are mortal. Losses continue. Flak does not discriminate between veteran and newcomer. Each operation carries risk measured in lives. Back in Britain, engineers refine guidance systems that will one day lead to guided munitions. The seeds of modern precision warfare are planted in these missions. War is accelerating technologically. Radar improves. Bomb sights become more advanced. Aircraft engines more powerful. And through it all, the lesson of May 1943 endures. Imagination, when paired with discipline, can alter the battlefield. Yet as Allied armies push deeper into Europe in 1945, another truth emerges. Precision bombing can fracture infrastructure, sink warships, disrupt industry. But ending a war still demands men on the ground, cities reduced, and surrender signed. The science of the impossible has shifted momentum, but victory remains a grinding, human endeavor. And as Germany begins to collapse, the squadron that once skimmed across moonlit water prepares for its final tests. Because the war's end will not arrive gently. It will arrive under thunder. February 1945. Western Germany. The sky is no longer a refuge. Allied bombers cross it daily in vast formations, silver rivers stretching from horizon to horizon. But 617 Squadron does not fly in rivers. They fly with intent. Their target now is the Bielefeld Viaduct, a massive railway bridge carrying critical supplies toward the collapsing Western Front. Previous attacks by conventional bombers have scarred its stone arches but failed to break it. The structure absorbs punishment and stands firm, a stubborn artery feeding German resistance. At RAF Woodhall Spa, where the squadron is now based, briefing maps glow under dim lights. Red string traces the approach route across the North Sea, through flak zones, toward the viaduct. Tall boys are loaded carefully beneath each Lancaster. 12,000 pounds of precision. You can feel the familiarity in the crews. No bravado, just ritual. Harnesses tightened. Intercom checks. Final glances exchanged without words. Takeoff is smooth, heavy aircraft lifting into pale winter morning. This mission will be flown in daylight to ensure visual confirmation. That means exposure. Over the Rhine, flag greets them immediately. Black bursts expand at altitude. Time fuses calibrated to anticipated approach heights. The Lancasters hold formation, steady as surgical instruments. Bomb aimers lie prone, eyes locked to their stabilized sights. The viaduct appears ahead, arches cutting across the landscape like ribs. Smoke from previous damage drifts along its length. German gunners concentrate their fire here. Explosions rock the sky, close enough to rattle cockpit glass. Steady, steady. Release. Tall boys detach and begin their descent. From altitude, they seem almost slow, graceful, but gravity accelerates them into unstoppable force. One bomb strikes short, carving a crater near the embankment. Another hits directly beside a central arch, penetrating deep before detonation. The earth itself seems to convulse. A shockwave ripples through stone. The central span fractures. For a suspended second, the viaduct appears unchanged. Then the arch collapses inward, dragging adjoining sections with it. Massive blocks tumble downward in a cascade of dust and debris. Rail traffic through Bielefeld stops instantly. The Lancasters turn west, engines strained but intact. Another target considered resilient has fallen to calculated physics. Weeks later, a final mission is assigned. Berchtesgaden, the Obersalzberg complex, Adolf Hitler's mountain retreat. Intelligence indicates hardened structures built into alpine rock. Tall boys are again the weapon of choice. April 25, 1945. Snow still clings to high ridges as the squadron approaches southern Germany. The war is visibly unraveling. Allied armies are advancing from west and east. Yet resistance remains fierce. Flak erupts from mountain batteries as Lancasters line up over the Berghof and surrounding bunkers. The thin alpine air makes bomb ballistics unpredictable. Bomb aimers compensate, adjusting for wind and altitude. Tall boys fall into the mountainside. Explosions send avalanches of rock cascading down slopes. Concrete bunkers fracture. The The symbolic heart of the regime shudders under impact. Within weeks, Germany surrenders. For 617 Squadron, the mission ceased not with ceremony but with quiet stand-down orders. Aircraft are parked, weapons removed, briefing rooms emptied of maps. The science that bent water against concrete, that shattered viaducts and capsized battleships, has fulfilled its wartime purpose. But its influence does not fade. Post-war analysis confirms what engineers suspected. Precision bombing, when paired with specialized munitions, multiplies strategic effect while reducing waste. The tall boy evolves into the even larger Grand Slam. Concepts pioneered by Barnes Wallis inspire generations of aerospace engineers. Modern bunker busters trace lineage directly to those cylindrical weapons spinning beneath Lancasters in 1943. Guidance systems, laser targeting, satellite navigation, all descend from a simple idea: hit the exact point that matters most. For the men who flew those missions, peacetime is a different adjustment. Some remain in the Royal Air Force. Others return to civilian life, carrying memories of moonlit reservoirs and exploding valleys. The losses remain permanent. 53 aircrew from the dam's raid alone, more in subsequent operations. Names carved into memorials across Britain and Europe. History will debate tonnage dropped and factories disrupted. It will calculate production delays in weeks or months. But numbers cannot capture what it meant to sit at 60 feet over Blackwater, with flak tearing the sky apart, trusting mathematics to hold true. That trust changed warfare. The impossible became executable. The dam walls fell. The battleship rolled. The viaduct collapsed. And through it all, one principle endured. Innovation, discipline, and deliberate can tilt the balance of power. The war in Europe ends in May 1945. Celebrations fill London streets. Church bells ring for the first time in years. But in archives and engineering firms, lessons from Operation Chastise continue to ripple outward. Because the bouncing bomb was never just a weapon. It was proof that when science, courage, and precision converge, even the most immovable structures can be undone. And that proof will echo into every conflict that follows. May 1945. Europe exhales. Church bells ring across Britain, echoing through streets that had grown used to sirens. Flags unfurl from windows. Crowds gather in Trafalgar Square, faces lifted toward a sky no longer filled with bombers. Victory in Europe is declared, and for a moment, the noise of celebration drowns out memory. But memory does not disappear. At RAF Woodhall Spa, the dispersal pans sit quiet. Lancasters that once carried tall boys and upkeep mines are lined in neat rows, paint weathered, engine silent. Ground crews walk past them without urgency now. The war machine is slowing, gear by gear. For 617 Squadron, there is pride. Decorations awarded. Citations read aloud. The Victoria Cross presented to Guy Gibson months earlier becomes part of national legend. Barnes Wallis receives recognition for engineering brilliance that defied convention. Yet legend simplifies what reality complicates. In the Ruhr Valley, reconstruction begins almost immediately after surrender. German engineers rebuild the Möhne and Eder dams, reinforcing them with lessons learned from British physics. Concrete is poured thicker, structural designs altered. The scars of 1943 are filled, but the history remains embedded in stone. Allied analysts pore over captured documents. Reports reveal how severely the dam's raid disrupted hydroelectric output in the immediate aftermath. Industrial production dipped. Coal mines halted operations. Transportation networks were forced into rerouting. Thousands of forced laborers were diverted to repair efforts. The strategic effect was measurable, but so was the resilience. German armament production, under relentless direction from Albert Speer, recovered faster than many British planners had hoped. War, it seems, adapts as quickly as innovation. This duality defines Operation Chastise, an historical debate, a tactical masterpiece, a psychological shockwave, a temporary industrial setback, not a war-winning blow. And yet, something more enduring took root. The raid forced military thinkers to reconsider scale. Massive formations dropping thousands of tons of unguided bombs could devastate cities, but a handful of aircraft delivering precisely engineered weapons could fracture specific nodes in an enemy system. That concept evolves rapidly in the Cold War. Seismic bombs become models for penetrating munitions designed to reach hardened silos. Research into rotational stabilization informs missile design. Hydrodynamic calculations once applied to reservoirs find new purpose in naval engineering. You can trace a line from the spinning upkeep mine to modern bunker busters guided by satellite coordinates. It begins with a simple, radical question. What if the target is not the surface, but the structure beneath it? For the surviving aircrew, the legacy is personal. Reunions are held years later. Men who once whispered over intercoms at 50 feet above water now speak in measured tones about that night. Some describe it as the most terrifying hours of their lives. Others call it the most precise. All agree on one thing. It demanded absolute trust. Trust in engineering calculations. Trust in commanding officers. Trust in one another. When the spinning mine left the bomb bay at exactly 232 miles per hour, there was no margin left for doubt. Museums begin to display fragments of the original upkeep. Visitors stand before cylindrical steel and attempt to imagine the physics involved. Models show how backspin generated lift and adhesion against concrete walls. Diagrams explain rotational inertia, but diagrams cannot recreate the sound. The sound of Merlin engines echoing over dark water. The concussion of detonation against a dam face. The roar of millions of tons of water unleashed. In Germany, memorials also rise. Civilian victims of the floods are named and remembered. The human toll becomes part of the story, reminding historians that precision in war does not erase suffering. It concentrates it. This complexity deepens a narrative. Operation Chastise is neither myth nor miracle. It is a convergence of science and circumstance executed by young men navigating moonlit valleys under fire. As decades pass, the term bouncing bomb enters popular vocabulary. Films dramatize the raid. Books analyze its mechanics and consequences. The image of a cylindrical weapon skipping across water captures imagination worldwide. But beyond dramatization lies a harder truth. Innovation in war is rarely comfortable. It demands risk that borders on reckless and faith that borders on stubbornness. Barnes Wallace endured skepticism from his own government. Pilots trained for weeks at perilous altitudes, many considered suicidal. And on May 16, 1943, theory met reality. The water proved him right. Today, precision strike doctrine in air forces across the world rests upon that foundation. Identify a critical node. Engineer a solution specific to its destruction. Train relentlessly. Execute with discipline. It is a template first proven against concrete and water in the Ruhr. And while the world celebrates the broader victory of 1945, the quieter revolution born that night continues shaping conflict long after sirens fall silent. Because the science of the impossible did more than win a single raid. It changed how wars are fought. And once that door opened, it could never be closed. May 16, 1963, 23:28 hours. Derwent Reservoir, England. 20 years later, the water is calm again. Moonlight lays silver across its surface, unbroken, serene. Visitors stand along the embankment where young RAF crews once practiced at 60 feet, skimming so low their prop wash left scars on the water. A memorial service is underway. Names are read aloud into the night air. 53 from the dam's raid alone. The wind carries each name across the reservoir that helped prepare them. Time has softened the immediate shock of 1943, but it has sharpened perspective. Historians now evaluate Operation Chastise with distance. They measure industrial output curves, power restoration timelines, labor diversion statistics. Charts replace headlines. Analysis replaces celebration. The numbers tell a layered story. German hydroelectric capacity in the Ruhr dropped dramatically in the weeks following the breaches. Coal production slowed. Transportation networks fractured. Approximately 1,300 lives were lost in the floods, many of them forced laborers housed downstream. Repairs consumed immense manpower. Yet, by autumn of 1943, much of the infrastructure functioned again. So was it worth it? That question lingers in lecture halls and documentary panels. Some argue the raid's strategic impact was limited. Others emphasize its psychological effect, both within Germany and across occupied Europe. The symbolism of breached dams reverberated far beyond megawatt calculations. In Britain, it signaled something vital. Ingenuity could counter overwhelming force. The early years of the war had been marked by retreat and survival. Dunkirk, the Blitz, Atlantic convoys under siege. Operation Chastise represented controlled aggression, guided by intellect as much as firepower. Barnes Wallis lived long enough to witness the technological revolution he helped spark. Jet aircraft replaced piston engines. Guided missiles replaced unguided bombs. Satellites began mapping terrain with precision unimaginable in 1943. Yet the principle remained unchanged. Identify vulnerability. Exploit physics. Strike with exactitude. Modern bunker-buster munitions, capable of penetrating reinforced concrete shelters buried deep underground. Owe conceptual ancestry to the tall boy and upkeep, rotational stabilization, aerodynamic shaping, delayed detonation fuses. Each innovation echoes Wallace's calculations scribbled in wartime notebooks. Air forces worldwide now train crews with digital targeting systems that compute wind drift instantly. Laser designators paint objectives with invisible beams. GPS coordinates guide munitions within meters of intended impact, but strip away the electronics. And the core idea still traces back to that night over the Ruhr. Precision multiplies effect. At reunions, aging veterans speak quietly what they remember most. Not the explosion itself, though it was immense. Not the newspaper headlines. They remember the approach. The moment at 60 feet, when the dam filled the windscreen. The split second when release meant no turning back. The trust that mathematics will behave exactly as predicted. War compresses time. Decisions are measured in heartbeats. When the upkeep mine skipped across the reservoir surface, it did more than clear torpedo nets. It demonstrated that even entrenched defenses could be studied, understood, and methodically overcome. For Germany, the lesson was equally stark. Infrastructure once believed immune required reconsideration. Dams were rebuilt thicker. Protective measures improved. Defense planners worldwide began assuming vulnerability rather than permanence. In the Cold War era, strategic planners adopted similar thinking. Hardened missile silos were designed to resist seismic shock. Naval vessels incorporated compartmentalization lessons learned from catastrophic penetrations. The arms race became not only about size, but about penetration and precision. Operation Chastise occupies a singular place in that evolution. It was neither the largest raid nor the deadliest. It was not decisive in isolation. It was transformative. The image of a spinning cylinder defying gravity endures because it represents more than destruction. It represents calculated defiance of assumption. The assumption that dams were invulnerable. The assumption that conventional bombing was the only option. The assumption that physics set unbreakable boundaries. On May 16, 1943, those assumptions fractured alongside concrete. As the memorial ceremony at Derwent concludes, silence settles over the reservoir. The water reflects stars exactly as it did decades earlier. The difference lies not in the surface, but in understanding. The science of the impossible did not end with the war. It became embedded in doctrine, engineering curricula, and strategic planning. It reshaped how nations approach fortified targets. And it left behind a caution as well. Precision increases power. Power increases responsibility. The men of 617 Squadron operated within a world consumed by total war. Their innovations served a cause defined by survival. In later decades, similar technologies would require careful stewardship to prevent escalation beyond control. History does not offer simple verdicts. Operation Chastise was daring. It was costly. It was brilliant in conception and brutal in consequence. It proved that imagination, disciplined and tested under fire, can alter the trajectory of conflict. And in doing so, it redefined the boundaries between what seems impossible and what becomes inevitable. The water at Derwent remains calm tonight. But if you listen closely, you can almost hear the distant echo of Merlin engines skimming its surface, carrying a weapon born of mathematics and courage toward a concrete wall that believed itself eternal.